Imagine the whole church discovering their passion to care, one small group at a time. You're listening to this special podcast series, Care Journey, from the Journey with Care podcast.
I was working downtown and I parked my car and there was 3 people that had been squatting in the parking lot that night. And they were busy gathering their stuff and getting rolling off of the sidewalk, getting up. And I was torn. I'm like, do I say good morning? Is this really a good morning for them? They're sleeping on the sidewalk. And I just took the chance and I just said, good morning. And the one fellow turns and smiles. He says, good morning, And it really made me think, okay, this isn't rocket science, treating one another as human beings.
Welcome back to another episode of Journey with Care. We are in our Care Journey series, a series highlighting some of the topics that are core to the work of CareImpact in the community and their work with CarePortal. And we actually developed a small group course that goes deep on each of these topics. But we just wanted to give you a glimpse into some of them, give you some real stories, some real voices that hopefully inspire you and maybe spark interest in you wanting to go deeper and actually take the course that we've developed. So today we are talking Awakening Dignity, and we have a special guest, Kathy, with us. But before we bring Kathy into the conversation, I want to remind you that we have Journey with Prayer, a 5-minute devotional series to start off your week. That's on a separate podcast feed. You can go to the show notes to find that or find it on our website at journeywithcare.ca, and that will come out the same day as this one if you go to the website. Otherwise, you wait till Monday. And I also want to remind you that we exist because of the generous donors and those listeners, those that sow into the work of CareImpact in the community. We would love for you to join our team to help keep the podcast going, to keep our work in the community going. So if you want to be part of that, if you want to be a sponsor an episode, head over to journeywithcare.ca and there are links for you to be able to do that. You can also check the show notes for those links. All right, Wendi, you want to introduce our guest and our topic for today?
Well, Awakening Dignity is part of our discipleship pathway that we have church small groups going through, and we're getting some good responses. But in studio today, I'm so happy to have with us Kathy Boschmann, who is not a new voice to our listeners. Kathy, welcome to the podcast.
It is great to be here again. Always loved having great conversations with you and Johan.
Yeah, well, Kathy, you do a lot of administration and behind the scenes. You help make CarePortal happen across Canada with our team. But beyond the administrative role, and you have a real heart for people. So let's dive in. What does Awakening Dignity mean to you as you are driving down that street, walking down that grocery aisle? What do we mean by Awakening Dignity?
For me, it is a matter of seeing everybody as regular people and not judging people according to what they look like on the outside. It's about recognizing that we really are all brothers and sisters. Whether we know each other or not, we are related. And that has really been growing in me in this last year or two, especially.
Well, that is a value for our team at CareImpact and the churches that we are working with. That idea of God has made everyone in his image, and seeing people, the Imago Dei, the image bearers of Christ. And how do we actually live that out when those instant impulses to judge people on the surface and not humanize them? You have had some encounters very recently, we don't have to look far, where you've had encounters with people while you were driving to work. Can you tell us about that experience at the stoplight?
Yeah, I drive through downtown every day to get to work. And this one day in particular, I was very impacted. I had stopped and I met my friend Carrie, who I see every day at a certain corner that she is usually there asking for money. And sometimes I have given her, other times when I've stopped, I've originally asked her name just to get to know her, and sometimes given her a care package. But sometimes I would just stop and say, Carrie, yeah, how's your day going? Or whatever, how are you doing with the weather that you're living in? And this one day, I went past that stop and she wasn't actually there. And, but I had been listening to some worship music, and the song was just about how beautiful the Lord is, how wonderful, how love to look on his face. And as I was singing it, I was envisioning Carrie. And there was another lady, Lena, who I'd met earlier. Like, their faces were just coming to me and remembering just this idea that we were all made in the image of God. And as I was worshiping the Lord, I was remembering that as I love them and honor them and acknowledge them, that I am honoring God. And that it was a real spark, a real moment. And I was working through that along my journey and trying to dry my tears, as you know, before I got to anybody in public could see me, my red eyes from just processing that. And that's really stuck with me, obviously, as a very meaningful moment, and has really impacted the way I have interacted even more with those I meet, particularly on my drive to work and around the community, but also as I go to doors, meetings, CarePortal requests, making connections with people in the community. It's really been an eye-opener for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Kathy. It just brings to light in everyday terms, Matthew 25:35, it says, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me, and I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." It's in the everyday. It's in the people that we encounter that you saw Christ in them. And scripture is so clear that when you welcome the vulnerable in my name, you welcome me, Jesus says. And tell me a little bit more. Let's dig a little deeper. What did that do to you as you were seeing them as image bearers, as God, through that beautiful worship music? You saw Carrie, you saw individuals' names come forward. What did that do to you as you were experiencing that?
It softened my heart even more. And I think also brought light to where I haven't treated people with dignity, and just that piece of allowing transformation to happen within me. And I think with each interaction that I had leading up to that and beyond there, I think it really just changed the way I would interact with people. I used the office space downtown this summer, and at the one stoplight, there was a disabled fellow who would be there most times and taking the time just to listen. And he had a hard time speaking. And it just gave me more patience. It gave me more humility, and being able to say, hey, but for the grace of God, there go I, right? That whole piece of understanding, enabling me to put myself in other people's shoes more so. Yeah, and wanting to stop and hear a little bit of their story as well, and to recognize that our lives are complicated, that people don't choose to live on the street. There is a story there, and there are reasons why that's where they've come to, or people that, are in a hard place, that have a social worker that need to help to make sure that they can stay together as a family. There's more to the story than just one or two poor choices. There's a lot behind every person's life, and learning to respect that.
Well, and what you're describing is a modern day well where Jesus would meet that Samaritan woman. We need to create space for that, right? It's all around us. And I ask myself, how many times do I miss those opportunities, those Jesus moments where I could be interacting with others, not as my project, not as just a help me understand poverty understanding, but really those encounters with others and seeing people for who they are. Because I recall when you came back into the office after one of these encounters and how that profoundly impacted you. And I was working on the curriculum with Johan. We were co-creating this discipleship pathway for church small groups. And I'm saying, that's it. You're living it, Kathy. We need you to share that story with us, because that's what it's all about. It's seeing Jesus and others being impacted, not as your project, but you had an encounter with Christ that had impacted me. But I wonder, what prevents us? Let's have this honest discussion. What prevents us from stopping in those moments and taking the time to have more encounters? What are the practical barriers that we're dealing with, realistic barriers that prevent us from doing it more often, being with people more often?
Fear, I think, would be the number one underlying thing. What am I going to say? How do I say it? Yeah, well, how are they going to take it? Receive it. And just to throw another story, and I was working downtown, like I said, and I parked my car, and there was 3 people that had been squatting in the parking lot that night. And they were busy, gathering their stuff and getting rolling off of the sidewalk, getting up and whatnot. And I was torn. I'm like, do I say good morning? Is this really a good morning for them? They're sleeping on the sidewalk. And I just took the chance and I just said, good morning. And the one fellow turns and smiles. He says, good morning, And it really made me think, okay, this isn't rocket science. Treating one another as human beings that you would in your neighborhood is really key. Just being present and being love to one another is so important.
Well, and as we love, perfect love casts out all fear. I think fear can always be there. It's not like, don't wait till the fear goes away. I think we need to push through it and recognize, oh, this is a stretching opportunity. I need to grow here and grow that muscle, because then we can access that prefrontal cortex where we can actually be relational, actually be loving, and actually connect with other human beings. But it's so true. I think fear prevents me. I was going to say that another barrier for myself is that I can have tunnel vision. I am going somewhere from point A to point B, and I'm not even noticing people around because I am just so focused on what's happening upstairs in what my thought process is, my timeline of needing to be certain places, that I actually get gypped from having those encounters, those meaningful encounters where God wants to break in. And it's an awareness for me to loosen up a little, start looking, to have more encounters, more opportunities to be human to human, to show that human side. We're not human doings, we're human beings. And that is so needed. Johan, do you have another?
Well, for me, I'm not someone that likes small talk. So even taking the time to start small talk is just cringy to me. If I'm going to have a conversation, I want to go deep. I want to have deep conversation. And quite often when you're just passing someone on the street, you're not looking for a deep conversation. And there's an investment there. If you start a conversation, I feel like you got to give a little bit more of yourself. And sometimes I'm just not in the place where I'm willing to give more of myself. There's so many things already in my life. Like how can I even add more? And once you have that deep conversation, you're invested. So where do you go from there? How much is it going to cost you in time and resources in the future? These are things that sometimes go through your head. I don't know if that's a good thing to say at all, and it's not like I don't want to have compassion to the person on the side of the road. It's not that I don't want to have that conversation. It's just, this is sometimes one of those barriers that prevent me from taking that extra step to say hello and to having that conversation. These are things that go on in the back of my mind.
I totally get that, Johan. In fact, it reminds me of a story, and it relates back to what Wendi had said about that conversation we had in the kitchen. I had stopped at the light and gave a little care package, just some socks and a couple of granola bars, to a fellow standing on the corner. So I asked him his name, and he told me his name is Hector, and I told him mine and just had a little small talk. Then he paused, and then he said, I've only been homeless since June. So had only been 3 months. And he told me why he got evicted from his hotel or his apartment. And I said, he was able just to have some compassion and say, wow, that must have been really hard. Or it's amazing how much you can say in one traffic light, one red light. And then I said, well, I really hope that you're able to find somewhere safe to live before winter comes. Right away, he told me, he said, I called my sister yesterday and I'm going to go be staying with her. And I was just able to share his joy with him and just say, that's awesome. And I wish you well, as I started driving away. And, but just even to take that moment to share his joy, just in that 90 seconds at the stoplight, it really impacted me in being able to do that and to remember him, to wish him well, and to pray for him as I drove away, just that all that would turn out well for him. It was, it was a really special moment.
Wow. And what I love about that interaction is that as you connect human to human as equals, made in the image of God, it erases that sense of shame that so often people carry when things aren't going well, as if that's a measure of their worth and their value in society. But that he felt open enough that you gave him that place of safety, that he could share this information and that you could validate him rather than make him your project. I just love that you were talking neighbor to neighbor and normalizing the journey moving forward. We all go through challenges. And I think sometimes when we don't live through poverty or we fit into society in a mainstream kind of way, we have a more difficult time being vulnerable like that. And I think there's a lot we could learn when we drop the mask as well and just be neighbor to neighbor. There's another aspect that I would love to talk about when we're talking about awakening dignity. And we've been seeing this happen as we've been unveiling CarePortal in Canada. When we invite the church in to wrap around children and families who are going through various challenges in life, there's something that happens actually in that interaction with social services. Kathy, let's talk about our interactions with social workers. What's that been like as we've been equipping churches in awakening dignity for social services?
It's been really interesting to hear about the interactions. I think of one of our white people especially. She just has this great compassion and empathy for our social workers. She actually will insist that they join her when she makes an interaction because she wants to help social workers become yes people for those they're serving, because so often they have to say no to any requests that are coming from their clients. And so what through CarePortal will enable them to be able to say yes and help supply some of their needs. And this particular white person, she will takes interest in the social worker or the caseworker that's come out and will take time to encourage them. Another thing that comes to mind is that at Christmas and spring, we've done little appreciation gifts for our social service workers. And that is one thing that they often talk about later on, is like they will keep the little cards on their desk that just say thank you for being who you are in our community, that it's so encouraging to them. Another time, I remember I was at a luncheon sitting at a table with several social workers and just took time to say thank you. Or with the one, I'm like, thank you for what you do. And she was like, that's the first time anyone has said thank you to me in 2 years that she'd been working as a social worker. She'd never heard those words. And like you were saying, they often get a bad rap. But when we can honor and show dignity and respect for the amazing hard work that they do in community, I think everybody wins. That there is a refreshment that comes through those words, encouragement and appreciation. And it enables those of us who aren't in those positions, government positions in the community, just to say thank you, because they're truly representing us as people, that we're employing them to do this work on our behalf, and to say thank you and to recognize that we need them as our community needs them is so important.
Yeah, these are hard roles and they're making big decisions. They've got huge caseloads and crisis upon crisis that they're needing to navigate, and sometimes be bearers of bad news, and other times be discouraged because those resources and the bureaucratic lines are not that simple and straightforward. And they're in the trenches day in and day out. And what you're describing isn't an anomaly. It wasn't just at that table. I hear it over and over and over again when I'm connecting with social services, that we've never been thanked before. we've been told the F-bomb, but we've never been told thank you. We don't even know what to say. And they're tearfully sharing this. And it brings tears to their eyes when we can simply say, we see you. And we thank you for this difficult place you're in. And how can we wrap around and support the work? Because the church is called to be in these spaces. It's not just a government or a nonprofit's role, but how do we bring dignity into these spaces that we've often alienated out of fear and a lot of trepidation? We've alienated the people that we actually need to step in and support.
I just want to remind our listeners, a little bit of a callback here, that we did a series called Battery Life, and one of our episodes, we interviewed Rebecca, a social worker. Really good episode if you want to get some key insights into what it's like being a social worker and how those around us can support and care for social workers. Just a really good interaction with someone that both loves CareImpact, CarePortal, and yet has her boots on the ground as a social worker doing the hard work. I really encourage your listeners to go back and listen to that. I'll throw that link in the show notes. Make sure you catch that one.
And one thing that I'm capturing from today's conversation here is that when we're in a posture of listening and truly listening and sincere about wanting to connect with other people and hear their story, our compassion can grow. Our hearts can grow 2 sizes larger. This isn't an impossible thing. This isn't rocket science. It's about being people to people, recognizing that their story matters. God is writing their story as well. And we just need to be in a posture to be available and listen.
What you're saying reminds me of a family that we served during the pandemic. It was a single mom, and her teenage daughter needed new beds. And I brought a couple of youth with me to this request, which was in the North End, which is the poorest postal code in Manitoba. They had never been into this community. They'd only ever driven by. And so it was a real eye-opener for them. So that was interesting to expose them into a home that they would never have experienced before and had a chance to process that with them. I went on a return visit to this family and brought some cutlery or something. I can't remember what it was. But during the second visit, what was very interesting, you could see the mom was particularly hungry for connection because of the pandemic. We closed the glass door and spoke to one another through the door. And I stood there for 20 minutes as she told me her life story. She opened up to me. I was amazed at how comfortable she was and longing for connection. And all I had to give her was my time. That's all, and my listening ear and my interest, my curiosity. And it really impacted me, that her willingness to be vulnerable with me and to share her life story, and enabled me to once again see that those we're serving, our neighbors, are just like us. We don't have, no matter our postal code, our life situation, the difficulty that we're dealing with in that moment, neighbor to neighbor, we can show love simply by taking the time to listen, to be available, to be present. And it really impacted me and has brought transformation to me, as I hope it gave to her during that conversation and those interactions.
Wow, that is so profound. And that resonates with my experience too when I've connected with people. When I hear their story, you know what it does for me? It makes me more brave to be vulnerable with them and others, to drop the mask, to let people in, because they have been transforming my life as well. Thank you, Kathy, for taking the time to share some of your experiences and helping us to understand better what it means to awaken dignity in our communities.
It's been great to be here.
Thank you for joining another conversation on Journey with Care, where we inspire curious Canadians on their path of faith and living life with purpose in community. Journey with Care is an initiative of CareImpact, a Canadian charity dedicated to connecting and equipping the whole church to journey well in community. You can visit their website at careimpact.ca or visit journeywithcare.ca to get more information on weekly episodes, Journey with Prayer, and details about our upcoming events and meetups. You can also leave us a message, share your thoughts, and connect with like-minded individuals who are on their own journeys of faith and purpose. Thank you for sharing this podcast and helping these stories reach the community. Together we can explore ways to journey in a good way. And always remember to stay curious.